Hello, welcome to our next session entitled SAS9 to SAS Viya, How to Streamline Your Migration. I'm very pleased to welcome Eric Lacombe from Ernst Young with us today. And Eric, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little idea of who you are, that'd be great.
Thank you, Dan. Hello, everybody. It's me, Eric. So basically, I'm a senior manager working for Ernst Young, EY. I've been working with SAS for almost 30 years, so 28 years. Actually, I'm working on modernizing SAS environment, mainly migration project in the for some big financial institution right now. And also, I'm very proud, I'm the founding president of the Montreal SAS User Group, which was founded in 2003, sorry. And it is still active to this day. So that's about me. But I'm sure you're not here because of me. You're here because of what I'm going to show you. That was the abstract, so I guess everybody read it if you're here. So a little bit about EY. Our purpose is building a better working world. And basically, we are 400K people around the world in 150 countries. And we are mainly 4 integrated service lines. So you have assurance, consulting, strategy, and transaction, and tax. And one thing that is very interesting is the last part. And we're proud to work with others, from our client to other stakeholders, to use our knowledge, skills, and experience to help fulfill our purpose and create positive change. When I was talking to Dan a few weeks ago, I said, Eric, you have too much material. I said, I know, but my main goal here is you're going to have access to my presentation. I put all my source in my presentation, so if you want to go deeper, if you don't have enough time, you have everything. So you get a lot for your money, basically. A quiz. And looking at your cell phone won't help you because the quiz is up there. So who thinks an analytics modernization project is easy or simple? By raise of hand. No? Okay. So who think it's complex? Okay. Well, you're at the right place. I'm going to try to give you some hints. And it has been documented also for the past 2 decades by authors and research firms that modernization project is quite complex. So I won't go over all the sources. At the end of my presentation, I've put a bibliography, so if you want to read all the details of the books or the research are there. But basically, like for the first source, only 40% of BI projects are successful. So basically, 60% are not. So it's quite a huge number, I should say. But there's hope. I really believe in pragmatism, basically. So theory is good, but having a pragmatic approach, I think, is really the key to your modernization project success. And that's why I'm here to everything I'm going to be sharing today is based on my personal experience. So that's the approach I suggest. Challenges. Challenge number 1. Where do I start? Well, we need to keep two key principles when doing a migration, basically. One comes from Maya Angelou. If you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going, basically. And the other one is an older citation that knowledge is power from Sir Francis Bacon in 1597. Basically, we need to keep those principles in mind in order to understand and adequately, like I wrote here, define the scope of the SAS asset based on reliable data. So you'll see I'm gonna give you some tips to increase your environment knowledge. And also, increasing the results and the reliable data that you have will help you reduce the scope of your SAS modernization project, as well as your platform risk, better understand your current assets, and reduce your ops and project costs. Source. Where do I start? Well, one tool I like is the SAS content assessment. Basically, the SAS content assessment is a series of utilities that SAS is providing free of charge. It's working on AIX, on Linux, on Windows, so all the operating system. And it really helps understand what you have. So from programs to logs to metadata, store proc, everything. And I'm going to use the laser. So it's really interesting because you can use it to simplify your migration to a newer version of SAS 9.4 or help you to migrate to SAS Viya. So it's really for both situations. Challenge number 2, how to assess the unknown. I've seen a lot of shadow IT and SAS. You know, usually, I cannot talk for everybody, but I saw a lot of shadow IT. Oh, hi, Jérôme. I saw a lot of shadow IT, and, well, shadow IT means you don't know what your users are doing, basically. So it increases the unknown. Well, what do? Well, we need to keep in mind the 2 previous principles and try to implement them to better understand what we have, right? So, how do we increase the usage visibility? Well, one simple tool to use is the SAS9 application usage. Again, it's included into the SAS content assessment. The objective, it's very easy to execute, for example, on Linux. But one caveat is you need to run it at regular intervals because it's giving you a snapshot of what's running at a specific time. So at the time of execution. So if you want to use that tool and include some kind of timeline, you will have to run it at frequently. So here's an example of the output. Bear with me that it's using the SAS logs. So basically, all the apps that are using the spawner. So if you have an app that is not using the SAS object spawner, it would not be shown here. So number of spawner, number of apps, number of users, and the number of connections. So it gives you, this reports give you like an overall dashboard of what's running. But we can go deeper, or have a different view, I should say. For example, here, it's getting interesting because we had the time dimension. So basically, oh, okay, something happened around October and November, like there's an increase in connections. Oh, cool. But what happened? Well, it's up to us to investigate. Same thing, you have the number of connections per apps and the daily count of users per app. So this can help you understand which app is used, which user is using what. So That's really interesting when migrating. Here, you can select a specific app. For example, here we selected the SAS store process web app. And again, we've got the time dimension, and we see, oh, again, starting in September, we had an increase in the number of connections. Same thing for the daily count of users. So, another view on the left side. That's very helpful because you see what actually is being used and who is your most, the number of connection initiated by users. So who would be your highest user as far as connection is concerned? Who's using SAS, who's not using, maybe reattribute or reconsider your licensing, reassign license to other individual who would need it. And interesting things that we can see here is, for example, on the left side for the application, where is it? Here, the second one, sorry. For example, if you have a high number of store proc, well, you need to consider that you will have to convert this to Viya jobs because store proc in itself doesn't exist the same way in Viya. So you need to convert this. But as you can see, we have quite a lot, or I can assume we have a lot. So there's different report who would give us the detail, but basically that would give you a hint into we need to consider additional efforts to convert those store proc into SAS Viya jobs. Another thing, there's some Web Report Studio app that are used on the left side, but in Viya it doesn't exist the same way. So in your migration plan, you would need to consider finding an alternate solution in order to address this. So another solution would be to use SAS Enterprise Session Monitor. My intent is not to give a course on SAS ESM. Again, it's a little bit more complex than the other tool that I showed you, because you need to install an agent and a server component. The good thing is that all the reporting comes out of the box, and you can go very deep into the process, being able to drill down which procedure is being used by a specific process. And it allows real-time or near real-time reporting. So basically, this is like the main dashboard that you would have. And then on the upper, for example, here you see how your environment is going. So as far as the resources are concerned, the jobs, the load by user, load by type of processes. So it gives you like an idea of what's happening in your environment. And then you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. For example, if you have a long-running job or a long-running session, you click on it, and then you can see what's happening. And there's a lot of stats. The color are difficult to see, it's probably in the room. Oops, sorry. But you have like the CPU, the memory consumption, the I/O throughput, and you have also the storage stats of your SAS work and of your utility work usage. So you can see it fluctuates through times. So it helps you to investigate potential problem or find candidates for optimization. Again, like I was saying, you can go at the procedure level, and it's quite powerful, like to find optimization or investigate, like I was saying, some jobs that are long-running jobs. So another possibility is to leverage what you have in SAS 9.4, so SAS Environment Manager, by implementing the SAS Environment Manager data mart. Again, you need to do some installation and configuration. It adds, when you do some installing config, it adds a bit of complexity. The good thing is that you have also some out-of-the-box report available. I'm going to show some in the next slide. But basically, you have resource, data usage, artifact counts. So I know quite a few admins who are using this to have a view of their system. So it can be very interesting when planning the migration to have those different views, users, servers, resources, and you can create your own also. Another solution that I did is a custom one. I've called it the processes data mart. Basically, it's running a tool that is fetching the running process at a specific interval. For example, each and every 15 minutes. It collects all the processes, so not only the SAS running jobs, but the non-SAS processes, batch and interactive, that's important to mention. It can be run on multiple operating systems and on various SAS platforms. Because the SAS, for example, SAS content assessment, one caveat is that you need a SAS 9.4 environment to be able to run it. So this could be run on 9.2, 9.3, and so on a very old version of SAS. So it consolidates all the info into a database, and afterwards you can do whatever you want with your data. Basically, it helps identify the long-running jobs. Again, helping also to identify optimization candidates that you may want to optimize before migrating. It highlights the resource-intensive jobs, also subjects to optimization. You can monitor the resource usage by user. So we can do and be proactive by coaching and optimizing their code. And one good thing I liked about the solution is that it allows us to discover non-SAS processes that are a potential security risk and shadow IT, again. Like I was saying a few seconds ago, some consideration about SAS content assessment. Only for SAS 9.4 deployment. For example, if you're on SAS 9.3, you need to migrate your objects to 9.4 to execute the tool. And the execution sequence is important. When I started using that tool a few years ago, it was not that documented. When I was preparing my paper, I realized, oh, finally, the execution is documented. And it's very important, for example, to follow the sequence. There's no value to run the code check if you did not do the gather SAS code before, because the gather SAS code will go through all the objects. For example, a store proc or an enterprise guide project, get the code so you can analyze it afterwards. So again, the sequence is essential. The source. I hear often that people do all the sequence, but they tend to not analyze the log. But the log analysis is very important. There's a tool called the Summarize SAS Log Steps utility. This tool will help you refine your assessment, basically. Include as many logs as you can to get a clearer view. So not only a few execution on a month, but if you can have like an execution over a year, so you can get some monthly process, quarterly process, and so on. Again, I will show you a report afterwards, but it helps identify candidates, processes for optimization in your current SAS environment. It helps also to identify candidates, processes for CAS. Basically, I did put a reference for you guys. But there's also something you need to consider, because in order to work, all the logs need to be using the same code sets. So prior to using the tools or prior to analyze all your logs, you need to convert your code sets to one single code set. I did put an example here on AIX 7.3. I did use the iconv utility. But it's important to consider that. The SAS Content Assessment published application produced data mart. One thing that happened in the past, the data mart may require some data structure adjustment, because it creates a huge data mart. And when you try to send it for analysis, either through your own platform from your SAS9 4 environment to your Viya platform, you may get timeout because it's really huge. So what we did discover is that the layout is not optimum. So you need to sometimes go in it and change the attributes of some variables, or do some compressing in order to be able to have an optimized data mart. Or optimized data marts, I should say, because there's more than one. So again, review the default variable length and reduce it when appropriate. So here's an example of the code check. There's one good thing about that report, basically, is that part here. So number of compatible programs, because when you have a high percentage, you're very happy, because it means that maybe you want to leverage a lift and shift approach. If not, maybe you need to reconsider the approach that you want to leverage. On the next slide, I'm showing you guys a log sample report. So I was talking about the summarize SAS log utility. So it's an example of output. Number of logs summarized. Here, it's interesting, step optimization candidate. So it's going to tell you, well, maybe you should do something with those and those and those, because with the other, you can drill down and see what code is problematic with the other tab up there. For example, the step max real time, I've seen up to maybe 30 hours, 35 for a step. So we did optimize a job in the past because everything up that was more than 10 hours was looked very carefully. And the number of table produced. So there's a lot of interesting stats that you can consider right now to optimize your asset. Challenge number 4. How to identify the data used by the SAS jobs. Well, one way of doing it is activate the audit message for SAS library access through the SAS logging facility. Again, this is only good for programs that are using libraries. There's other way to go and fetch the database and so on, but this is an idea that I'm giving you for libraries access. So basically, the idea is to build an historical data mart with the collected information from the logs. And it's very useful to track data usage for each program, pinpoint your dependency, and evaluate the SAS data footprint. And here I'm giving you some code to how to build this kind of audit report. And you're going to have the source to, if you don't want to type it. Challenge number 5. Data encoding and data representation. Be aware of the data blind spot, such as encoding and data representation, as it can cause data corruption. For example, older version of SAS were used, some of them were using W11, which is using 1 bytes, but Viya by default is UTF-8, which is using 2 bytes. So you may get some truncation problem when you move from SAS9 to Viya. And again, the data representation is the way the data is stored on each and every operating system. So Viya is mainly on Linux. So if I show you an example, let's take an example. SAS9, the SAS environment, so 9.3 on AIX, encoding W11, and data representation would be AIX 64, and we want to go on Viya on Linux, which is UTF-8 and Linux x86 64 bits as for the data representation. So one simple way that I've tested and that is interesting to use in order to be able to convert both is to use a simple proc copy. So basically, you define a lim name, data out, and with a few parameters. For example, the out representation would be Linux x86 64, and the out encoding would be UTF-8. I did put the contrast equals to no, and a basic proc copy with the no clone option. It's very important because if if you don't put it, it's going to keep the attributes of the incoming library. This was running pretty quickly. I did compare a few methods, but again, there's caveats. For example, if you have indexes, it won't keep the indexes. So in that particular case, you may want to use some other procedure like pragmatic, for example. So, right on time. Now time for questions. So,
Before we get to questions and I finish chewing here, can we give Eric a quick round of applause? Thank you, Eric.
thank you.
If you have a question or comment, just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone over to you. So, sir.
Thanks, Eric, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So I just have one question. Like if we are considering lift and shift from our existing grid to
Yep.
SAS Viya,
Yep.
and let's say if we have a 3-node grid,
Yep.
should we consider migrating it to SAS compute server first and then adopting the SAS CAS, or we directly migrate to the CAS cloud analytics servers?
Actually, it depends of your environment. Like there's not a magic formula. But for example, if you're on an old version of SAS, maybe you want to consider a lift and shift, like to reduce the risk, and afterwards identify your CAS candidates, because not all programs are good CAS candidate. So usually I tend to suggest to go in 2 steps. But using some of the approach, you can clean up before and then lift and shift only the pertinent. Are you on-prem? Are you running on-prem? Okay. So prior to moving to the cloud, just assess, clean up, and you will do like some kind of lift and shift of your program, and afterwards you migrate to CAS. Or if you want to do it, because you need to recode some stuff going into the CAS.
We do use stored procs.
Okay. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Does ESM show us data sets that are duplicate in the system?
That are duplicates?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about this. I don't think so. But again, I'm not an ESM expert. Probably in the SAS Innovation Hub, you could ask your question to an expert of ESM. I'm using it to monitor the activity, not as a governance tool.
But if you want to clean up before the migration,
Yep.
what tools or methods did you use to identify, anything that garbage that we want to eliminate?
Well, there's the, I showed the data mart earlier, so you would be able to track the usage and see if there's dependency using that. One other tool I did develop in the past is do an inventory of all my disk, all my storage, and afterwards I was doing some basic reporting like, okay, what's the time of the creation, what's the size, and so on. And I was able to identify candidates using that kind of tool. So based on the name, the size, and some timing, I did use that in the past, in a few previous lives. So you can have some quick wins using that kind of tools too. But you need to develop a few custom tools. But afterwards, you just schedule it and that's it. You have like your reporting, or you can even do some automated cleanup based on some criteria, sorry.
Follow-up question, is it a best practice to migrate the code into Viya and have the users generate their data sets in the new platform rather than migrating the data set itself?
Rather than migrating what? I didn't.
The data set, the SAS data sets.
Well, you will have most probably a need to migrate a few data sets because the job won't live in itself in Viya. Like there's data dependency. Some code most probably will use data that the data is actually stored in the 9.4, let's say, environment. And that job in Viya will need the data from your 9.4 environment. So you need to bring a minimum in Viya in order that your code to allow your code to work.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Any other?
You mentioned earlier about a program being suitable or not for CAS, right? If it's a candidate for CAS or compute.
Yeah.
What would be a way to determine or some metrics based on these tools to determine that?
Well, if I go back. When you analyze the log, it analyzes all the steps, all the programs, and it's telling you basically who would be good candidates. There's one report up there telling you who would be good candidates for CAS, basically. But it's not all programs, all jobs that are good candidates for CAS. It's going to analyze the kind of procedure used in that program, the time. There are some parameters that I've seen in a presentation from someone in France. But this report is really great to identify the CAS candidates.
So based on CPU time and things like that?
No, it would tell you,
Oh, it would.
hi, Eric, those programs are good CAS candidates.
So it will call them out explicitly?
Yeah, explicitly. But you need to look at it afterwards, because it's based on some criteria and maybe some logic, but that gives you an idea where to start.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? Going once, going twice? Eric, you've been very generous with your time. Yep.
So quick question. So what unexpected things you have seen that you haven't expected?
Can you repeat, please?
Have you seen anything that you have not expected when you're doing the migration? Is there anything that when you started the migration?
All my presentation is like, for example, I was talking about the data mart that was too big. That was a surprise. The execution, how to execute the SAS9 content assessment, the first time I did use it a few years ago, that was a surprise because, it doesn't work, or I see, I get errors. Like, you're at the end of the process and you have weird data. Okay, the sequence was not the exact one. So we could be talking for 5 hours of surprises. But at the end, using some tips that myself or other presenters are giving will really help you guys to streamline migration. Because the tools as evaluate, the knowledge is built, so there's good knowledge base around to learn from others, basically.
Thank you.
Anyone else before we wrap it up? Anyone? Eric, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you. One more
No
round of
problem.
applause for Eric, please.
Whoops. I just wanted to show my last slide.
Absolutely, go for it.
So I did put a bibliography at the end, and again, I did write a citation. So SAS Innovate embodies the spirit of sharing and collaboration needed to discover and develop best practices. It is these intrinsic values that make SAS Innovate a success. So guys, feel free to come and speak and share your knowledge and experience. That's very much appreciated. And also, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world usually do. So go ahead and migrate. It's not that bad. And again, my contact information, if you have additional questions, feel free to contact me. Oh, sorry, sir.
Very good. Thank you again, Eric.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.